Welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host John Harris, as always, and we are back. Going to be talking AFC Divisional Round, or not AFC, NFL Divisional Round. We'll be talking AFC and NFC, of course. The results of that, and also making our picks for the conference championship, since there was only 2 games, so might as well knock this all out in one run for us and for everyone, mainly for us, because we're a 2-man show here. But anyway, let's dive right on into it. This weekend, or this previous weekend, the divisional round, much better games in the wild card, for the most part, except for the first one that we will be going over, which is in the AFC, number 1 seeded Ravens. They didn't get the memo, which good for them, as they blew out the Texans 34-10, which mostly that was in the second half. It was 10-10 going to halftime, but then Baltimore shut the door in the second half. As like I mentioned, they beat the Houston Texans 34-10. So your thoughts here, John, on the Ravens kind of dominating this one?
Yeah, they handled their business. They had the rest, and the only concern typically with that is that you're coming in not fresh and warmed up in terms of having played recently. But it didn't matter. The rest clearly worked wonders for them because they did their thing. They were viewed as the best team in the NFL even before that game. So it's no surprise that they were able to do what they did against a Texans team that neither of us expected to be in this position. We both thought they would probably be one of the worst teams in the whole league, because I specifically remember criticizing that Cardinals trade where they moved up to get Willie Anderson, because it just felt like they could be sitting here in a situation where they just traded a top 5 pick potentially. But they made the playoffs and they made the run, and I think there's no shame in losing to the Ravens. So great year for the Houston Texans. Absolutely should be proud of what they accomplished, and definitely can build upon it going into next year. Not with their first-round pick, obviously, but with all their other draft picks and free agency stuff. And for the Ravens, they move on. It wasn't a very close game. Lamar had another MVP-like performance. 2 touchdowns on the air, or through the air and on the ground. About 250 total yards from Lamar, and the Ravens defense stepped up. So not a whole lot to say about that game. I mean, it's sort of similar to last week, where realistically, it just wasn't a close one.
Excuse me. Yeah. Just to piggyback off Lamar. Yeah, I mean, extremely efficient, even though he only quote unquote, only 150 yards in the air, 16 for 22 completion wise for all the completion percentage people. There you go, extremely efficient. And yeah, you mentioned some back-breaking runs, extremely efficient there with 100 yards and only 11 carries. As did get sacked a little bit early on, but then it seemed like Baltimore, figured out how to to pick up the Houston blitzes, and also being able to run in the traditional sense, because they were extremely effective doing so, especially with Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. By the way, looking at the box score, completely forgot that Dalvin Cook snuck on this team, but he didn't do much. But regardless, they're able to do that. So yeah, like we alluded to when we made our picks, and granted, we both picked the Texans to at least cover because we thought they would at least keep it close. But we both felt going into the game that, hey, Texans, it's been a great run. You're a great team. You got good pieces, but you're just not on Baltimore's level. And especially we saw Baltimore's defense too. Big kudos to them, because I think that's what I was mainly concerned about, wrestling Russ, because the defense sometimes, it's hard to get to jump back in the seat and get your edge back. But no, they definitely showed that why they're one of the top defenses throughout the regular season, and it showed once again here in the first round, or in the divisional round, first game for them against the Texans, as it was really hard on C.J. Stroud and company to have consistent drives, because their only touchdown was off that punt return. So and they weren't able to run the ball, which is a big part of the Bobby Slowick, who comes from Kyle Shanahan offense, is being able to run the ball and do play action off of that. And so their offense was neutered for the most part. And once again, we already knew that, because no Tank Dell, who was a bright spot, and they were missing the right tackle, Tyus Howard, for a good portion of the year as well. So although disappointing loss, of course, a lot to look forward to in Houston. And like you mentioned, though, don't have their first round pick, but they do have Cleveland's, who they did knock out. So it's you kind of already, it's like already having your first round pick, because it's literally probably 2 picks above what the pick that they're giving to Arizona in that Will Anderson trade would be. So overall, win-win for the Houston Texans. Large picture-wise, of course, they lost this game, and for the Ravens, like we mentioned, yeah, just taking care of business as and looking for the bigger picture, avoiding the upset like they did a couple of years ago last time. Because I don't know about you, and we'll talk about this maybe afterwards, but it feels like Lamar is probably going to be the MVP. So, but last time he won MVP when they were the 1 seed, remember they got knocked out by I think Tennessee in the opening round or in divisional round, and that was a huge shocker. They avoided that this time. Seems like they got their eyes on the prize. So we'll see what they do in the championship round, and obviously we'll talk about that game later on. But let's move on over to the NFC, to the 1 seed there, where it is the San Francisco 49ers. Now, it seemed like rust maybe affected them a little bit more as they had to go through a nail biter against my Green Bay Packers. Had to have a late comeback as they were down 21-14 going to the fourth quarter, scored 10 and hung on to beat my Packers in this one. What were your thoughts here? Of course, I'll share mine in a moment, but your thoughts in regards to the Niners hanging on here.
I really felt like Green Bay kind of controlled the game. I felt like Jordan Love, his 2 interceptions, albeit unfortunate, it was his first year starting. It felt like the youth of the Packers kind of came into effect here. And I think that a lot of these same players, a few years down the line with more experience under their belt, would be a little bit more prepared for a moment like this. But I want to give my hats off to the Green Bay coaching staff because I thought they looked incredibly prepared on both sides of the ball, being able to make this a really scrappy game and one that, like I said, honestly, I felt like they were in control of. I thought that we came into a situation where San Francisco, I felt, was going to go down and lose. But the interceptions from Love happened, the missed field goal, just a couple different random mistakes. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm fully blaming it on Love or the kicker because, like I said, I thought this game, in our picks, I thought this game was going to become a blowout. I thought it was going to get real out of hand, and San Francisco would just be able to overwhelm them with their experience, with all their talent, because, they are probably the most talented roster in the NFL. And so there was just a lot of factors that I thought this game was going to turn into a blowout, and it wasn't. And I felt like San Francisco kind of snuck away with one here. And, I think that Green Bay, similar to Houston, should absolutely be proud of the result here because, like I said, I thought that, simply put, they were kind of the better team on the day. They just, unfortunately, were a little bit less experienced in some of these moments, which kind of led to the result that happened. So, yeah, for the Niners, I mean, good for them. They move on, but in the playoffs, all that really matters is winning. But this definitely doesn't feel like a confidence booster for San Francisco because you gotta wonder. All right, Baltimore kind of put the beat down on them. Did Green Bay learn anything from that game that led to this kind of a result where it was a lot closer? Is maybe, Detroit, which, spoiler, everybody knows Detroit won, but we haven't talked about it yet. But is Detroit going to maybe be able to learn some things from both of those games to implement in this? And then obviously is whoever they play in the Super Bowl going to be able to use this stuff too? Because San Francisco, interestingly, like they started off the year looking like the best team by far for the first 4 weeks. Or first 5 weeks. Then they had that 3-game losing stretch. Then they got back to their dominance. But sort of to end the season, they don't feel as strong as I felt they were about 2 months ago. Now, obviously, they could still win because, I even think back to like when the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. That first game they played the Washington football team, as they were known back then. Like they were a mess. They had a losing record and almost beat the eventual Super Bowl champion Buccaneers. And that type of result would make you feel less confident in the Tampa Bay Bucks, but they still got it done. So I'm not going to read too much into this game, but it is just something interesting because, the Packers coaching staff, like they clearly knew what they were doing in that Dallas game. They had the huge advantage, and I got to wonder what were the things, because I'm not, some NFL film breakdown guy, so I don't know what the specific things were. But but they saw some holes because Aaron Jones was able to have some success. The defense was able to make Brock Purdy not really look as good as he had been throughout the regular season. Christian McCaffrey was still great, but I mean, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel really didn't have an impact, which is not normal for this team. So yeah, just something of note for moving forward. But yeah, just on this game itself, San Francisco, I feel like they kind of snuck away. And for Green Bay, they should definitely be proud of the result, despite the fact that they lost.
Yeah. So I'll start with San Francisco, then I'll get to my Packers. In regards to Purdy, Purdy struggled. I think that's I have a consensus, and I agree with that, especially early on. It's one of those. Hey, there's a reason he was picked in the 7th round. He's still really good, obviously. Better than Shy. Probably no. Looking back, yes, he probably shouldn't have been the last pick of the draft. But he saw some of his limitations. Like he started the game off with the glove because it was wet. It was pretty much raining the whole game. So we saw his arm. There's been a concern of mine. Like arm strength is a little bit less than, but he usually has good anticipation. But especially if I'm comparing delicately to kind of like Tua, because that was our concerns with Tua as these quarterbacks that don't have the greatest arms, so they rely a lot on anticipation. It's tough in these weather and in these inclements, especially in the playoffs too. Teams kind of have tendencies or know your tendencies, and of course, Niners did lose Deebo Samuel, so that takes away a lot of the easy screens or slants or even the jet sweeps that Deebo can make. We've seen either. Sometimes, usually they're about 4 or 5 yard gains, but sometimes usually it's good for 1 or 2 of those breaking off for a huge first down or even a touchdown. But he got injured early, and I will say that seemed to kind of affect their offense as a whole. And we'll see his status for Detroit because that's going to be huge. Because apparently it's similar to an injury he sustained earlier in the season where he was out for 2 or 3 weeks. So obviously they don't have that luxury now or going into next week. But yeah, so it'd be interesting to see Purdy because like you mentioned against the Ravens too. You brought up the Ravens; they were a team that were able to make him look pretty bad, and that offense pretty bad as a whole. So, but obviously they were able to ride McCaffrey in key situations, and that helped. You mentioned the turnovers for the Packers, and I'll start transitioning over to that. Yeah, the first Love interception was tough because we were once again driving. It was at midfield. He was just late on a throw over in the middle. And great play by Dre Greenlaw there. And then in regards to the other interception at the end of the game, yeah, it was Love's one terrible choice. I know he made the other interception, but that was just a late throw. He was late on decision making. That one was just the second interception was just okay, Jordan, that's where the first year starting showed where because he had made some great throws on the run earlier, but that's just one running right, throwing across your body into the middle of the field on a 50-second drill where you still have 2 timeouts. Even Love said after the game, he's yeah, I got to throw that ball away, live for another day because we're driving for a field goal. And once again, there we were near midfield, so kind of getting into that territory. And then yes, of course, Carlson missed the field goal early in between the interceptions to potentially tie it, and that sucked, of course. But yeah, overall, I know we lost, but like I mentioned in our private little group chat, it felt like this was extra credit for not only for Jordan Love, but for this Packer team, because like we mentioned, they were the 7th seed. They really weren't supposed to be here. Had a good upset against Dallas, but it was. And everyone's already trying to. There's some people on the internet, the people who oddly, don't mention their teams, but they clown other people's teams. It's funny how they have all that time. But already say, hey, man, same different quarterback, same situation. It's Love's first season. We didn't expect him to be here, and this is the first time playing the Niners in recent years. I think you already kind of alluded to this, where Green Bay felt like we were in control for a good majority of the game. It's just our youth kind of showed. But I'm very encouraged going forward. Hey, we didn't have Christian Watson for a good portion of the season. I know he's healthy this game, but even then, he definitely seemed to be on some sort of a pitch count. And obviously, all the other young pieces, I assume they will get better and on both sides of the ball. But it was very encouraging. Like I said, if this was extra credit, maybe you're not gonna get the full extra credit, but maybe you get half in terms of on your report card at the end of the year. So yeah, very very encouraged about my Packers going forward. Obviously, tough loss. Would have loved to see us, no pun intended, make a run, of course. because you never know when you're going to have your opportunities to do so. But nonetheless, Niners, I think, like you mentioned with the Bucks, this may be a good scare for them to wake them up, and I'm sure they'll be ready to bring a next round. Although once again, we'll see the health status of Deebo Samuel, but we're able to ride McCaffrey once again. While we were saying, you and I were saying, and a few others throughout the year, like, hey, Brock Purdy's good, but he should not be in the MVP conversation because he has their offense relies on Christian McCaffrey and their skill position players, and Purdy's good enough to get the ball to them and make a few off schedule plays like he did that one touchdown to George Kittle. But other than that, especially in playoff weather, it was looking kind of dicey there for him. So we'll see if the Niners can get back to their dominant ways next week when they face the Detroit Lions and Packers. We go to Cancun, but we go to Cancun a little bit with our heads up higher. But anyhow, anything else before we move on to the Lions game?
Nope.
Okay, let's move on to the Lions game, as we've already mentioned, and I'm sure as everyone knows, of course. But if you didn't know, Lions did win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 31-23. Although, it was a little bit of a late touchdown, and Bucs technically did have a chance at the end. But regardless, Detroit gets another win, and good for their fans, of course, and everyone's rooting for them. So, your thoughts here in regards to the Lions advancing to the NFC Championship?
It was a good win for the Lions. I thought the thing that was nice for me to see, at least, was some of their young playmakers really stepping up. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown was great, but I thought Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs both had great games. Jared Goff was pretty solid, didn't necessarily make any major mistakes. Their defensive line, I thought, did a really good job at getting some pressure. Aiden Hutchinson with 3 QB hits. He did get a sack, and they also were very. I will give credit to Aaron Glenn because I'm not the biggest fan of his, and I think I've criticized him a bit on this podcast, but they were very aggressive with their defensive backs, both Melifonwu and Branch also getting in the mix with some sacks. So they did what they needed to do to generate pressure onto Baker Mayfield and to make him uncomfortable. And we saw that with the 2 interceptions. And I think that was big because, let's be honest, this defense isn't necessarily the greatest. They do give up a lot of yards through the air and or just a lot of yards in general, quite honestly. Because Baker had 350 passing yards. He threw for 3 touchdowns. If he doesn't throw those 2 interceptions, there's a possibility that those drives maybe keep going, and he's sitting here with over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a win. So I did think that ability to get pressure onto Baker, make him a little bit uncomfortable, and lead to some turnovers and some sacks was pretty key there. So I liked what I saw out of the Lions side. I do think they're still a little bit vulnerable considering that secondary. And if you're having to blitz to generate pressure at some point, certain teams are going to take advantage of that. So I don't know. It was a good win for Detroit. I like what they did to win this game. I just worry about them moving forward because also on Tampa Bay's side, I was very confused as to why they did not ever commit to the run. Rachaad White, 9 carries for 55 yards, and his longest was only 16. If you remove the 116-yard carry, that's still 8 for 39, which is like basically, still 5 yards a carry, which is, an elite number. So I don't know. It just felt like Tampa Bay was effectively running the ball. Even Chase Edmonds, their backup, 4 carries, 19 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. So like they had success running, and the game never really actually got out of hand because if you look all the way until going into the fourth quarter, they were tied. So they could have continued to run, and it just felt like I don't know, maybe they just didn't want to commit to it as much. And once again, I know that the pass was working. Mike Evans was killing them. Cade Otton and Chris Godwin had some good games. Even Rachaad White had a good receiving game. So I'm not saying they shouldn't have continued to pass, but Baker Mayfield is just a quarterback that in a close game I never personally want throwing 40 times. That's just kind of how I feel, especially when you have a talented running back like Rachaad White who is having success. So I do think that Tampa could have maybe tried to control clock a little bit more, could have tried to run the ball a little bit more and really just establish that ground game. And I think that maybe it would have made the difference because Detroit did have more time of possession and they did win the turnover battle.
Yeah. And just to add to a little bit closer game, because the first interception, I really wouldn't put on Baker. It was off Mike Evans' hands. So, that's one of those where
True.
you could chalk, you could maybe do 50-50 there. So yeah, I've been with you too, and with concerns with Detroit's defense, their secondary, and Aaron Glenn. And I think we saw a little bit this game where Aaron Glenn just wasn't willing to sit back and let them die a slow death and let them get picked apart. Being aggressive, setting some load in the box. I think that's what it seemed like to me just watching from the game side, or the TV side. And so I'm not sure if maybe that's what scared the Bucks out of running the ball more. Is, oh man, they're low in the box, we got to take opportunity. But regardless, kudos to the Lions for creating those turnovers, creating havoc. Not, like I said, not willing to die that slow, just forcing the issue at times. And it'll be interesting to see if how their defense matches up next week against very good offense of the 49ers. But yeah, on the flip side, I do want to give kudos to their entire offense. I mean, even Jared Goff, he delivered some big time throws, and it wasn't a day where outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, like their run game wasn't really gashing them. And even then, Jahmyr Gibbs, that one touchdown run, like, was awesome. And that shows like how good he is, and and hey, maybe we'll see if they keep Dave Montgomery around. I forget his contract, but regardless, it's good little thunder and lightning there, even though Montgomery wasn't extremely efficient. And yeah, I do want to give a shout out. You mentioned like Laporta too. Like just 2 weeks ago, week 18, it looked like he was like going to be done for a while. Last week, he's been toughing it out, and he's still, especially this week, like 9 for 65, still being a main focal point of the offense. That's great. And then, you mentioned all the other guys, even like Jameson Williams got involved, the guy that we've been high on. And of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown did his thing, as always, being extremely impactful as well. So, it's a good confidence, good things from the Lions. These were the expectations that many kind of put on them to be in this conversation at this point in the year, and they've answered that. It's something like we mentioned with many other teams, Philadelphia, that had high expectations. They didn't match them, and they obviously are at home / in
Dallas.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to say it. You said that, but yeah,
I know. I gotta throw them in there.
Yeah,
they're definitely in that category.
So they handled their business against a red hot Buccaneers team. Although they had their lumps, but like we mentioned, going into the playoffs, they were a team that had kind of been had found their form late in the season, which you often want to do. We'll see what happens with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's a little more murky, just because I think they have to re-sign Baker. They got a lot of I'm sure people have seen some of the. I think Adam Schefter oddly made the post about all their impending free agents this offseason, and I think they're not. I think they're in a tough spot cap-wise. So we'll see how much of the crew they can retain, and if they can try to keep this momentum going into next year. But it's always tough with personnel. You don't know. So, for Detroit, they survive in advance. They meet the Niners next week. We'll make our picks for that later on in the pod here. But, good little win for the folks at Ford Field. They will not be there next week, of course. They'll be at San Francisco. So we'll see, how they fare on the road for their first road game. All those young Lions, no pun intended there. But let's move on over to last, but definitely not least game on Sunday and of the divisional round. There's another Chiefs-Bills classic, as many would dub it. And like all the others, unfortunately, in the playoffs, the Kansas City Chiefs come out on top. Another heartbreaker for the Bills, 27-24. What were your thoughts here, John?
The Chiefs do it again, man. They do it again. They find ways to win. I don't know how, but they always do. Travis Kelce had a great game, and I thought this was a really good performance from him, considering that it sort of felt like he was kind of on the decline a little bit this season. Didn't have the greatest of years compared to what he previously was doing. His brother just retired, so I don't know if he's officially stated he's retiring, but he's retiring. There's just a lot of question marks about Travis. He's got his podcast. He's dating Taylor Swift. There's all these other things unrelated to football that maybe just had you wondering, like, how much does Travis really have left? But he had a great game. I liked how they committed to the run. Pacheco had a good game. Edwards-Helaire had that, big play. So it was nice to see them, Andy Reid, which I will say hadn't really been doing throughout a lot of the year, but really have a firm grasp on this game and the way to win. So Mahomes was efficient, and the run game really worked wonders for them. And I will say too, and this actually, I mean, the Chiefs still won despite this, but once again, the touchback rule is just dumb. It's really dumb to me. I just don't think it should be a rule. So good on them at least winning, despite the fact that, the McCole Hardman fumble thing happened. But for the Bills, what were you saying?
I was going to say, I'm impartial on that rule, but I understand why people want it changed. I don't. Granted, it hasn't happened to my team, so I guess I've always been like,
yeah.
And granted, I'm influenced by Chris Sims, and Sims always argues obviously for the rule, where it's like, hey, like you can fumble out of bounds everywhere else, and you still get the ball back, but that should be the one. Regardless, we've talked over this before, and apparently, I've seen like some reports. I'm not, I forget who. So sorry if I'm not citing, but there's like rumors that the NFL is going to push to change that this offseason. So we may not have to worry about it much longer. But sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I just find it a little ridiculous that if you fumbled it like a yard behind where you did, that all of a sudden you get to keep the ball. But because you did it specifically right there, it just, to me, it doesn't encourage players to try to score. It almost like punishes them for attempting to score. So I don't really understand the logic behind why it's a touchback, but I digress. I get it if it was like you fumbled in the back of your own end zone, but trying to score in the other end zone, I don't know. I think it's kind of a dumb rule. I don't think they're ever going to change it, but I do think it's dumb personally. And I say that as a Cowboys fan who we still won the game against the Lions when that happened to us. So it's like, it's not like we lost the game for it. I just think it's dumb. Anyway, good win for the Chiefs, and for the Bills. It's just tough. They dealt with injuries throughout the year, so I'm not going to sit here and, really criticize them. I did feel like, honestly, they were capable of winning this game. It's just kind of unfortunate that this might be harsh, but some of their playmakers didn't really step up. Stephon Diggs did not really do anything in this game. Only 3 catches for 21 yards, the 1 carry for 7. Like, he didn't really have an impact, and he's one of their most expensive players. So you kind of wonder, what does that look like for his future? James Cook, he had kind of been a focal point of their team for a long time, wasn't super efficient. Meanwhile, Ty Johnson was a little bit more efficient than James Cook was, and you kind of wonder, well, maybe do you feed the hot hand in that case? I don't know. I'm just spitballing here because it felt like Josh Allen kind of carried this offensive performance here, and it just kind of sucks to see him lose, and people are going to probably blame him in the media and blah, 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 when in reality he accounted for 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the leading receiver was Dalton Kincaid with 45. So, and, James Cook had 61 total rushing yards, 3.4 yards per carry. So it wasn't that efficient. So I don't know. It's got to sting as a Bills fan, just considering how they just can't seem to quite put it all together in one season due to injury, still plagued by the lack of playmakers or what have you. And also, I mean, outside of, Diggs, like Khalil Shakir and Kincaid, 2 young guys, they kind of stepped up, but like, it just goes to show, like, I remember when I got flamed for saying that a couple of years ago that if Diggs ever got hurt, that this Bills receiver core is just so thin. But there's just nobody that really steps up. Like, behind Kincaid and Shakir, their next 2 leading receivers were Latavius Murray and James Cook. Did Gabe Davis even play in this game? Like,
no, he's been out for the past few weeks. So Gabe Davis is to escape the slander.
Because I didn't notice him throughout the day, and I was kind of wondering. I was like, man, did he play? Because he didn't have any catches, and the only reason I actually had to question that is because he has had multiple games this year where he did play and did nothing. Yeah. So that's why I had to question it, because
it's not even this year, John. And we've both been talking about this for a while. But I'm with you, so I'm on your side, as you know. But yeah, like for those that don't know, like we've been talking about how Gabe Davis is not a number 2 receiver. Sorry, it's just not. He had the one divisional game a couple of years ago where he went crazy. Other than that, just kind of been a spotty big play guy. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. But like, even, with him out, they just don't really have a lot of other options. Like I said, it was Kincaid and Shakir. Dawson Knox, I think he got injured at some point during this game, but even he has not really been a big play guy. So they need explosiveness. They need some weapons. It feels like this is sort of the same thing that we're saying with Mahomes, but at least Mahomes has Travis Kelce, who's consistent. Like Stephon Diggs is supposed to be that guy. And I say this as someone who owns a Stephon Diggs jersey. He just has not been that same player this year. And I don't know. Well, I'm starting to wonder about his actual future in Buffalo. And also, not only him too. I want to throw out, even on the defensive side, Von Miller. Like Von Miller signed that massive contract,
6 years, 120 million.
Yeah, and he still has 3 more years on it, and he's really had no impact on them this game. He's played in 13 games and didn't start a single one. Like in this game, he had 1 tackle. Yeah. 1, no sacks. Like, I don't know. It's just crazy that because I bring this up a little bit, this rant, because you and I talked about that post. I don't know who it was, Bleacher Report or something, that posted criticizing Josh Allen.
Well, Josh Allen's expected to make like 80 million next year, even though they're not, or something. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, where they're basically saying it's going to be even harder for Buffalo to win now that his contract is about to kick in. And I went through the whole list and I detailed 5 of their top 6 highest paid players were either Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano, who are both very key to this team, but didn't play this year due to injuries. So they weren't even in this playoff game. So you can't even say that those guys are helping and contributing as the current team, which I expect them to when they get back. But Tre'Davious White's been very injury prone the last couple of years, so I don't know. We'll see. But then you got other guys in that list like Von Miller, who aren't even doing anything, or Stephon Diggs, who aren't even really having that much of an impact. Diggs had that one huge game against Miami in week 4, whenever it was, and other than that, he hasn't really been a big contributor. And so I don't know. Buffalo is just in a really weird spot where I don't think it's a massive reset, but I do think that they're going to have to look at some of their kind of top guys and say, listen, it's time to move on. We got to let other guys get the playing time, other young guys, and really probably heavily target, in my opinion, some more offensive weapons in the draft, because the defense, despite those 2 key injuries, was able to figure it out, and I think that's because of how much attention they have given to the defense throughout the years, drafting some of these younger guys along the defensive line, in the secondary, and so they've made it work. But on the offensive side, man, they need more production out of the receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about before, and I'll go into it right now. There's another stat I'm sure you've seen it about how the Bills have not really drafted wide receiver or tight end, and I've made this comparison before, and I'll say it again.
It's the Packers' problem.
Yeah, it feels like Josh Allen's going through the Aaron Rodgers deal, where especially early, and I'm going to talk about later Aaron Rodgers, but the Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers issues, after for that, using the mid 2010s, where we had a few good runs. We had Devontae Adams, but it was after that, I was like, what? What do you have after that? And granted, that was we at least had prime Devontae Adams. This is Stephon Diggs, who, I think it's fair to say, it's fair to wonder, is he starting to hit the end of his road? Because he's, a little different in regards to, he's always been a receiver that's a little bit smaller than the prototype, and I think it's fair to see, is this, speed and agility only lasts you so long, especially when you're undersized already. Not that I doubt him. I don't think they'll let go of. Granted, I haven't looked at his full contract numbers. But yeah, and then I'll just go over quickly draft wise. But I'm trying to see. Sorry, trying to find my photos. But I know they only spent 2 picks on skill position, tight end or wide receivers. Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir within the first 4 rounds. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid, rookie tight end. We said it even then. It's really hard for a tight end to come in and contribute. I know that. We just talked about Sam Laporta, but that's a rarity that a tight end comes in and is able to produce, be that guy day one. And we saw it even with Dalton K. They basically had to make it happen, start kind of force feeding him into the offense when they made the coordinator change. And that's important to remember too, was that Joe Brady had to step in to be the OC for a bit here, towards the end of the season, and he wasn't that great of an OC. Remember, he was with the Panthers. That year they went 3-0, but then teams quickly figured them out, and then they even let him go that year. So, I'm sorry. So I have the stats. So since the Bills have drafted Josh Allen in 2018, they have drafted 1 receiver and 2 tight ends within the first 4 rounds, and that's not including Khalil Shakir last year, who's been the only one that's really worked out. I mean, even last year, I don't know if you remember, when they were in the playoffs, they had to go and call up Cole Beasley, who was off his couch because they had poor wide receiver depth. So
Yeah.
this has been an issue in Buffalo for a bit, and it's something that they need to address. But to go back on the money thing too, like Von Miller, we were in our party, we were in the in a party talking while watching this game, and one of our friends was like, Von Miller's playing, and I was like, yeah, Von Miller's on this team and playing. That's how
Yeah.
that's how lack of an impact he's made. So, and I'm looking at his contract per Spotrac. So I'm not sure if it's completely right, but at least per Spotrac, Bills could get out of that contract after this offseason, so we'll see if they do that. I respect them to. But yeah. And outside of that, you mentioned Davis White. Like he could be at the end. And then we've mentioned before, I don't mean to dog on him, but Dawson Knox, that was a bit of an overpay for kind of a mid tight end. Like he's a good NFL player, but he's not, I don't think he was worth the amount that he got, So, and even Ed Oliver, a guy that, had a really good game the previous round, but we've seen he's not like a difference maker on defense. Like we've been mentioning, they have a difference maker on offense with Josh Allen. They had one with Stephon Diggs, and who knows if that'll be going forward. But who's a difference maker on defense? They don't have one right now. So of course they're going to fall short to a good Kansas City Chiefs team that still has Patrick Mahomes and actually is leaning into their identity of being a run team and building off of that. And once again, let's not forget, Chiefs defense really good too. Like let's give them their flowers. I know they've been an offensive show for a couple of years, but their defense throughout that time has always been solid. But this year is what they've been leaning on. And like once again, like you want to compare teams, let's compare teams, because I also saw like Josh Allen's always had stacked teams. Like no, like let's compare them to the Chiefs. Once again, the team that's been beating them. Like Chris Jones, you take over anybody on the Bills defensive line. I mean, heck, I would say George Karlaftis might take over anybody in the Bills offensive line. Okay, maybe you could throw in at Oliver, but regardless, like. And then linebackers, especially in this game, you're going to take the Chiefs linebackers. And corners, they got two good corners that no one talks about. And L'Jarius Sneed, who I know is like really rated high, and he's done a really good job. And you could say he kind of owns Stephon Diggs, because remember that other divisional game that Gabe Davis went off? Stephon Diggs was not a factor in that one either, even though Gabe Davis is going crazy. And then I know we love McDuffie. He's awesome. So yeah, like. And then even safeties, their safeties, Poyer's solid, but no Micah Hyde either. And, they're breaching towards the end, so you can only coach up so much. So, yeah, like it's not too shocking that the Bills, quote unquote, fell short. It's not all on Josh Allen. I know, like, obviously, I'm not trying to dog on Tyler Bass because he's had a rough couple of days. He missed a field goal once again in tough conditions. Like, it's in Buffalo. People, they were just hiring fans to shovel snow so they could play the freaking game for the second straight week. So winds are crazy, like, yeah. So, and then obviously, yes, Bills had some missed opportunities, but like you said, Chiefs really were in control all game, and without that fumble into the into the end zone that results in a touchback, like this game probably would have been out of reach at that point anyway. So, sorry, rant over. We'll see. Kudos to the Chiefs, of course. I mean, it's not like they lucked into us. They handled their business, and they're a lot like the Warriors of their prime right now, where it feels like where they kind of sleptwalk into the playoffs once the playoffs have started. Now they've they're doing what it takes to win, even if it isn't pretty right now. So, yeah, Mahomes, of course, I mentioned with Lamar, he was extremely efficient too, 17 for 23, and yeah, once again, they were able to lean on Isaiah Pacheco in the run game, and Mahomes was able to do some things off that while. Josh Allen's in the Bills offense, it's Josh Allen, make plays, because you're a leading rusher, and yeah, like you mentioned, John, the receiving core is lacking thereof as of right now. And that's no offense to Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. They're both young guys. Maybe they can be better down the road, but like know your window too. So it'll be a very interesting offseason for Buffalo, because we'll see what happens offensive coordinator wise and what they do. If they decide to invest in defense again, that like they've done the past few years. So, because yeah, Greg Rousseau's like, I'm sorry, last point. Greg Rousseau, no, not trying to dog on him, but like he's had moments, but he's not, he's okay. He's not like a difference maker in terms of fishing key situations, like especially that people are dogging that one play. I'm sure at the 2nd and 9 where Allen tried to miss the guy in the end zone, even though Chris Jones literally blew up Deion Dawkins into his lap as he was throwing. Like, the guy was open. The opportunity was there. Just that happened. And I know Stephon Diggs was open for the first down, but there are the people out like Josh Allen was going for the kill shot. He was trying to, he's going for the touchdown because as we know, The Chiefs can go down very quickly and score if they were trying to settle for a field goal, like everyone was trying. Like some people were trying to, Monday morning quarterback and like, oh yeah, you should have thrown it to Diggs, and they could have kept matriculating and wasting time. Like Bass could have missed the field goal then too. So I don't know. Regardless, like I said, Chiefs, they get the big win. They advance to the conference championship, and honestly, I think it's a better matchup, the Chiefs against the Ravens as opposed to the Bills, because I feel like, once again, it would be like this game all over again, where it's like, hey, Josh Allen, you can't make any mistakes, and you have to be really awesome for us to even have a chance to win. And hopefully our defense can slow down Lamar. But we don't have to worry about that this week, as the Chiefs, they're pretty much at full strength. So, and a better matchup, in my opinion. So, anything else? Sorry that I took up a bunch of that time, but anything else you want to throw in there?
No, that was it.
All right, well, we'll see. Sorry. And as we move on, I do want to ask one question of you, a little bit related to the game, because like I see the haters are dubbing the Bills as the Cowboys of the AFC. So I don't know if you want to call. That's a little bit why I went on this rant, because it annoyed me. Not that it's a bad thing. Like, so sorry, before you go, because you talked about as one of our friends. Like, man, there are a lot of teams that would kill just to be in the playoffs. Like, we're seeing the Lions throwing a parade over here just to make the play. And granted, I know you want to win the big thing, but there are teams like that literally have not made the playoffs in years, and like wish they could be in the playoffs. And I know, obviously, of course, you want to win the whole thing, but
yeah, but I think that as a fan base, like once you kind of have a certain like level of talent on your roster, like making the playoffs isn't good enough. Like Bills fans definitely are not happy just making the playoffs, right? Like, it's with Josh Allen now, it's an expectation. Like, he's a top 5 quarterback in the league, and for both of us, I mean, I don't know our quarterback rankings after the season, but at least last year we both had it at number 2. So like, they should always be making the playoffs. So I don't think it's an expectation. That said, I wouldn't say they're the Cowboys of the AFC, because I think there's just and this is just my personal opinion, there's a difference between losing to, and this, no offense, to the Green Bay Packers and losing to Patrick Mahomes. Like, there's a difference, okay?
Or
like
Joe Burrow last year when they were clicking.
Like, like the Cowboys have played teams that I think have like weaknesses. The Niners are obviously really good, but even in some of those previous iterations of the Niners teams, like they had Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, who like wasn't the most inspiring, or last year it was the young Brock Purdy, who like, it's first year in, like, I don't know, like it was a close game. Like, Cowboys actually had their opportunities. They only lost by like 5 points or however it was. Like, they held the Niners to 19. They just couldn't score enough. So like, I wouldn't necessarily compare the way the Cowboys have gone about things to the way that the Bills have, because the Bills in their losses have lost to they lost to the Chiefs the year the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Pretty sure.
Yeah, and multiple times, of course. And last year it was the Bengals who were really good.
Yeah, and so I don't know. It just feels like there's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, and
because I mean, if you're gonna say that like the Bills or the Cowboys of the AFC, like what does that make the Ravens?
Yeah,
like Lamar hasn't won anything either, So that's why like I get a little bit annoyed. Number one, about just the conversation about Dak in general.
Of course. Yeah.
Because like, I understand where they're coming from when they say the Bills are the Cowboys of the AFC, because similar to the Cowboys, high expectations haven't quite lived up to them. But like I said, there's a difference. And also just in general, like the AFC is way more stacked than the NFC is at this point. So it's like the Dallas Cowboys have like 1 or 2 teams that really should threaten them in terms of making it to the Super Bowl. And then they like lose to like the Packers, who should not be one of those teams. And where the Bills, it's like there's like 5 teams that realistically could go to the Super Bowl out of this conference, and you beat some of those teams, and then you lose to like the eventual Super Bowl champion, or like Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who literally went to the Super Bowl the year before that. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel comparable to me.
Yeah, so we'll see if the Bills can, what they do in the offseason, of course, if they can find and to try to get over this hump. That it's a tough one. The Chiefs are a damn good team, like we're seeing. So,
also, I wanted to add too, I mean, not to belabor this point, but like the way that the Bills have lost some of these games too is like, you had 12 seconds left on the clock and the Chiefs made a freak play. Like they didn't get the ball in overtime that one year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
but it's all Josh Allen's
there's-
fault, John. That he apparently has to play defense too. Apparently, even though once again he literally tied the game up or put them in a position. There.
Yeah, to where when Dallas loses, it's like Dak threw a couple picks. The defense didn't show up this day. We couldn't run the ball. It's always like there's so many obvious issues that, like, I don't know, like the Bills kind of they got screwed one year. They just had a freak accident that only one team in the NFL can pull off, being the Chiefs, the literal best team in the league with Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes at that point. So like they've just had moments like that where it's like, to where Dallas, when Dallas loses, I found their losses a little bit more embarrassing. The whole, the botched snap debacle, like with the ref, in Jerry's World a couple years ago, like weird stuff.